Today we'll be covering compare and contrast. Let's begin. The mentor text trade book that we are using is called Living Things and Non-Living Things, a compare and contrast book by Kevin Kurtz. The subject is science. The grade level is first grade. The TEK that I have chosen is 1.9, organisms and environments. The student knows that the living environment is composed of relationships between organisms and the life cycles that occur. The student is expected to sort, classify living and non living things based upon whether they have basic needs and produce offspring. For the ELPS, English Language Proficiency Standards, we will do cross curriculum, second language acquisition, essential knowledge and skills. Cross curriculum, second language acquisition learning strategies. The English language learner uses language learning strategies to develop an awareness of his or her own learning processes in all content areas. In order for the English language learner to meet grade level learning expectations across the foundation and enrichment curriculum, all instruction delivered in English must be linguistically accommodated, communicated, sequenced, and scaffolded. Commensurate with the student's level of English language proficiency, the student is expected to A. Use prior knowledge and experiences to understand meanings in English, monitor oral and written language production, and employ self-corrective techniques or other resources. And C. Use strategic learning techniques such as mapping, concept mapping, drawing, memorizing, comparing, contrasting, and reviewing to acquire basic and grade level vocabulary. Our lesson objective: students will sort and classify living and non-living things based upon whether they have basic needs and produce offspring. Differentiation strategies to meet diverse learner needs. For our GT students, we will take examples from the book and ask critical thinking questions such as how do non-living things change and grow? And how can a non-living thing make copies of itself? For special education, this teacher will have a one-on-one session with a student, for example, named Max. She will explain model and give him more time to finish his assignments in class. For English language learners, for ESL students, we will provide connection between pictures of what is living and non-living. The materials that will be needed for this lesson, which is based on a 5E lesson plan, is it's the book that we are using for our mentor text, our trade book, Living Things and Non-Living Things, a compare and contrast book by Kevin Kurtz. We will need a blank sheet of paper, pictures of living things, pictures of non-living things, a pencil, color pencils, or markers, access to watching the living and non-living things video, and goldfish crackers, and if possible, a live goldfish would be very helpful. For the engagement portion, vocabulary needed to be covered is classify, arrange a group of people or things in classes or categories according to shared qualities or characteristics. Sort, arrange systematically in groups, separate according to class, type, etc. Living things, things that can grow, move, and breathe and reproduce. Non-living things, things that can not grow, move, breathe, and reproduce. Basic needs for survival: living things need air, water, and food, nutrition. Produce, to create or form something as part of a physical, biological, or chemical process. And offspring, the young of a living thing. For our exploration portion, students will be divided into pairs. They will be provided pictures to compare of non-living and living things. In their journals, they will write a brief description of traits that classify each picture as living or non-living things based on students' prior personal knowledge. They will then place all living thing pictures into one collage and then place all non-living things into another collage. Once complete, we will discuss which traits make an object classified as living or non-living. For our explanation portion, students will watch a brief video called living and non-living things. As a class, we will provide them with the concept of what traits. This video will provide them with the concept of what traits are used to classify a thing as living or non-living. The students will understand that living things can move, breathe, reproduce, and grow. So according to this video, what are the traits that classify a something as a living thing? Please take note as we do watch this brief video. Just bear with me really quickly, please. Alrighty, here we go. Noticed if you took some notations of what was considered living and non-living, he did point out that for a living thing to be categorized as living, they need to be able to move, they need to be able to grow, breathe, reproduce. So that would include animals, people, plants, because they do move. Okay, so now that we've discussed these questions, before we moved, so the question before the video, actually, I'm sorry, we should have gone over this, would be we have to discuss some prior knowledge observations which classify a thing as living or non-living. So before this video, some of the things that we may thought about, we need to drink, be able to eat something to keep going. We need to drink water. We need to be able to breathe. We grow, we move, we feel emotion and other basic needs. So after this video, now that we have actually covered and looked at these topics and they pointed it out, so there's at least 4 things, boys and girls, that they were pointed out that are confirmed to use for categorizing as characteristics to be categorized for a living thing, and even what is non-living. Now, so based on this video, we can confirm that living things actually they move, they breathe, they grow, and they reproduce. So plants, yes, they do move. They move towards the sun. They move very slowly. They don't move quickly. They do use photosynthesis, which is different compared to living things. So us as people and animals, we have to eat so we can consume our food. Plants don't do it that way, but they still do reproduce their own food, so it's very different. But we'll save that for another lesson. We'll move into that next time in our next lesson for tomorrow. So plants, let's see here. Let's take a look at some other questions real quickly. So based on the video, what we can confirm that living things can do that non-living things cannot do. So living things can move, breathe, grow, and reproduce, as we have reviewed. Um, how are plants alive? So plants, they do move toward the sun. They breathe in carbon dioxide, which we breathe in, oxygen, which they breathe out, so and so to say. And we breathe in their oxygen that they release, and they breathe in our carbon dioxide that we let go. So that's how we make this nice cycle of being able to breathe. That's why it's important to have plants. So plants do grow and they do reproduce by pollinating and producing seeds. So just like people, plants also expire too. So eventually we all, we all die. We all have to have, there's an end date to everybody, living things, that is, to be part of it is part of the life cycle. So we will move on. So for our elaboration portion, what we're going to go ahead and do, boys and girls, is we're going to go ahead and everybody get a worksheet. That is the goldfish versus goldfish cracker. And I do have our little goldfish Stevie here, live in person. So, or if you want, you can use either a picture or just think back as to when you've seen a fish in a fish tank, and think of how they swim around and you got to feed them every so often, or even your own personal pets. But what we're gonna do is think about a goldfish. So picture it in your mind. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and develop a more sophisticated understanding of the concept of living and non-living things by comparing a living thing to a non-living object. So this is where our goldfish example, pictured in your mind. versus our goldfish crackers that we have in our hands. So in this exercise, we're going to go ahead and collaborate in groups. So get in groups of 3 to 4. We're going to go ahead and observe a real goldfish. So picture it in your mind. You can use a video if you want to, or picture a real goldfish. Or if you have a real goldfish, I'm going to use Stevie here as my example. I'm looking at him now, so just picture it in your mind. Together, we're going to go ahead and answer some questions. So does your memory, in your mind, or if you're watching a video, just think back. Do fish move on their own? Do they need to eat? Do they eat? Do they need food and water? They do. Do they make more of themselves? So can they reproduce? Yes. So we're gonna go ahead and check these boxes off. So in the first one, does our goldfish or does the fish move? We're gonna go ahead and check that box. Yes, it does. Does it need food and water? We're gonna go ahead and check. Yes, it does. Does it make more of itself? Yes, it can reproduce. We're gonna check the box. Does it need any air? Yes, it does, because it's got the gills that has to breathe in the oxygen. It just breathes differently than what we do. So check mark that one. So now that we've check marked all of these questions, this makes it a living thing. So we're gonna put in goldfish. We're gonna check it. Okay. Now we're gonna do the same thing for our goldfish cracker. Can a goldfish cracker move on its own? No. So don't check that box. Does it need food and water? No. So we're not going to check that box either. Does it make more of itself? No, a goldfish cracker cannot reproduce itself. Does it grow and change? No, it doesn't. It has to be changed physically. We have to be the ones. So we have to manipulate it. Okay. And does it need air to breathe? No. A goldfish cracker does not. The only time it actually changes is if we bite into it. But that's us physically changing it. So, okay, let's go ahead and move on. And so we're going to go ahead and explain why the actual physical goldfish, the living thing, is a living thing. So what you're going to go ahead and do is just write a brief explanation on the bottom portion of your paper using all of these and turn them into sentences instead of questions. So, but we're going to go ahead and get to that in a moment. So based on these observation and evidence data collected, we're going to go ahead and conclude that our goldfish is living. Our goldfish cracker is a non-living thing. Together as a class, we're going to get and discuss the importance of why knowing the difference between a living and non-living thing is. Living things have basic needs that need to be met, such as people, like our families and neighbors and friends, and our classmates, and plants also. We need to be able to make food and everything else. Plants are very important to be able to breathe as well. So our animals, like our pets, responsibilities are important to meet their needs as well, and much more. We are responsible for meeting the needs of ourselves, so we have to make sure that we eat and drink water and grow. And then we also need to take care of our pets and the animals. I mean, it's not just pets, we have to also take care of all living creatures that depend on us. So the ecosystem is very important. So some vocabulary we're also going to go ahead and touch bases on right now while we're in this portion of elaboration is we're going to go ahead and talk about observation. So observation is the action or process of observing something or someone carefully in order to gain information. Evidence, the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So what that means is based on our questions, our findings, we can conclude that our assumption of the goldfish or our actual goldfish that we have pictured in our mind, our real fish, is the living thing based on our prior knowledge. And based on answering these questions that are used to categorize what a living thing is, that's how we know that our goldfish that we have pictured in our minds that we remember is living, and that our goldfish cracker is non-living. Okay? So that evidence is what we use to back up our new truth, our realization, our answer. Now, the data is facts, truthful ideas, and statistics, which are numbers, collected together for reference or analysis. So just using this table chart that we have of our worksheet that answers these questions will work as our data that we collected. Okay, let's move on. Now to conclude, for our exit ticket, please reflect on your learning. We're going to go ahead and have you draw a picture and write a brief explanation about plants and animals at home that you are responsible for helping to take care of. So think about your pets or think about some plants that you have around the house that mom and dad need to be able to help need to help you help too with, like watering the plants or making sure they get some sunshine or even just taking care of your pets like a bunny or maybe you have a bird or a puppy or a cat. So for example, I drew a picture of my little dog Gary here. He's my gray puppy. He needs lots of fresh air. He loves to run. He is growing bigger every day. He came from a female and a male dog, which are his parents, that had lots of puppies. So it wasn't just him. He had a lot of brothers and sisters. So for our evaluation portion, we're going to go ahead and explain and discuss with each other the 4 characteristics that differentiate between living and non-living things. So as we go ahead and think back with what we just went over, living things are categorized for sure to confirm that it is living. It needs to be able to move, breathe, grow, and reproduce. Students will explore, so we're going to go ahead and explore other living and non-living things such as plastic and fabric flowers. So if you want to go ahead and pick a false flower, think back. Um, what makes a fake flower? And what are real plants? So what can you tell us the difference between the two? So go ahead and observe them and think about them. Or think about some other things that are non-living and living, so such as a stuffed animal and a real one. So look at the pictures and build up your collage. So you're going to gather some pictures and you're going to get ready to do your collage. Then we're going to go ahead and observe and consider the traits of living things. So students will observe photos and choose whether it is a living thing or non-living thing. So go ahead and just go through each one that you find and go ahead and put them in a cluster on each side. Okay? So to think back about our book of living and non-living things, it is a compare and contrast book by Kevin Kurtz, which takes students on an exploratory journey of different differences between living and non-living things. The book explains the different traits of living and non-living things, with pictures of examples of both that show connection to the traits. They provide critical thinking of similarities and differences of what is living, alive, and what is not. So earlier in the day, we had gone over our compare and contrast book. It was very interesting. I hope you found it very fun and get busy. And please provide your assignments when you are ready. Please turn them in. Thank you so much. That concludes